Welcome to the second episode of The Tea with ENC. For those of you new here, I'm your host, Amanda Corral, and today we have a very special guest. Our guest is all the way from St. John's Country Day, Mr. John Sgromolo. How does it feel to be the very first guest on The Tea with ENC?
Well, Amanda, thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm super excited, humbled, and honored that you guys reached out to me to be on the first episode of Tea with ENC, and hopefully that this is going to become a valuable resource for athletic directors in our state.
Yeah, definitely. So just tell a little bit about yourself, how your journey to where you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I'm a former student athlete here in our great state of Florida. I was a baseball player and a golfer at Clay High School in Green Cove Springs. Go Blue Devils. When they're not playing the Spartans at St. John's Country Day, at least. Just kidding. All in good fun. So I was a baseball player and golfer in high school, and I had one offer out of high school to play college baseball, and that was at Flagler College in St. Augustine. So I went to Flagler, played there for 4 years. I got my bachelor's degree in business administration, and I was lucky enough to live out my childhood dream. I got drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers, and depending on when this airs, they're going to be beating the Yankees in the World Series, hopefully here shortly. But played 2 years of professional baseball, and then because of the impact the athletic director had on me at Flagler, I wanted to become an athletic administrator. That was my ultimate goal. So as an AD, you're the coach of the coaches. So I knew that I had to become a really good coach first and then venture off into leadership as an AD. So I became I coached back at Clay High for 1 year in 2013 and then shifted over to Ridgeview High School where I became the head coach and I taught business. I was 23 years old as my first head coaching job. So it was really green and got a lot of experience there at Ridgeview. We built a baseball program we were really proud of. And then in 2016, our athletic director went to the private sector, and I got my first AD job. And as many of you know, listening to this, a lot of times in athletics, they toss you the keys and say, go get them. So, I leaned on a lot of other athletic directors in the state of Florida to mentor me and kind of continued to work on my craft. When COVID happened, the Clay County school system decided that they wanted to expand their athletics program, and they created the coordinator of district athletics. And I applied, and I was super excited to become Clay County's first ever county athletic director. And it was great. We built a lot of really good things that are still thriving today in Clay County. I did that for 3 years, and then just on the off chance, I got an opportunity to switch over to private school. I loved being the county AD, and I did know for my long-range plans and leadership, I needed some more perspective, and I think as an athletic director, that's something that we all benefit from. There's nothing wrong with being at the same school for your entire career, but it's hard to learn what's out there if you don't expose yourself to what is out there. So I made the choice to switch over to St. John's Country Day School, and that's where I'm the director of athletics now. Private school is a lot different than public school, so my goal of learning the industry even more has definitely been fulfilled with a lot more to learn in years to come. So I'm enjoying myself at St. John's Country Day and excited to be on the show here today.
Okay, so you kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you want to go into more detail in terms of like going from AD at a public school, then switching over to Clay County District, then going back to being an AD, but now at a private school, what would be like the differences between those three stages in your life?
Massive differences, massive. So first I would say, being the athletic director at Ridgeview High School, Ridgeview at the time I was there was a 5A school and enrollment was around 1,500 to 1,600 students. That school now is a 6A school with almost 2,000 students. There's a lot of moving parts, and I think that it really tests your leadership on the ability to influence others when you're at such a big school, because the reality is you can't do it all yourself. You have to have resources, whether that's coaches in leadership roles or the support of administration or the support of parents and the support of the community. Being an athletic administrator is all about bringing people together for the common good. You really are the definition of a leader. And at Ridgeview, I had the ability to kind of learn what works, learn what does not work, but ultimately build that school spirit, build that team that moves us forward to our goal of creating that student athlete experience. Switching gears to being a county AD, it's a totally different job. And I told people after my first year of being a county athletic director, in a lot of ways, you're a lobbyist. And what you are a lobbyist for is athletics. You are in the county office to promote, support, and advocate for student athletes. A lot of times in a public school system, there's many different departments. You have legal and curriculum and transportation and operations and school choice and athletics. So there's all these different people vying for the same resources. So great county athletic directors are able to convey the importance of athletics. When you look at the data in the state of Florida, student athletes achieve well and beyond students that don't participate in athletics. And I think that was one valuable thing my good friend Dan Talbot in Polk County taught me was as a county athletic director, you have such a microphone that we're on right here, no pun intended, to spread your message that what you do as an athletic director matters. It makes a difference in students' lives and outcomes, not just on the playing field, but in the classroom. And that's really why we are interscholastic athletic administrators. So I learned that really quick that two things. Number one, you are the voice of athletics for your district. But number two, there's a little bit of a disconnection with students, which is tough. You know, there's been some other county athletic directors that are new to their role in the state, and they say, "Hey, what did you experience? What did you do different?" I said, you got to find ways to get back in front of kids, right? So at Clay County, we started some really cool recognition programs, the Student Athlete of the Week, the Athlete of the Month, the Coach of the Month. Those were as good for me as the county AD as they were for the people receiving the awards because it puts you back in front of your number one most valuable asset, and that's the students. So really cool job. Switching gears again to private school, It's different from a lot of perspectives. For me, the private school that I'm at is smaller. We're a K-12 independent private school. So our school is ran by a board of directors with a head of school. The director of athletics is seen as a senior cabinet level administrative position. I have my hands in a lot of different buckets, which is good and bad in some respects. It's good, though. It really is. It helps intertwine athletics with the experience at St. John's Country Day. Ultimately, though, what I would say to a public school athletic director that's different from private is little things that you kind of take for granted in public school. If you have a sprinkler that breaks, you call the county maintenance department and they come out and help you or can, kind of guide that. At a private school, you're a one-stop shop, right? So everything in that budget, whether it's the physical plant or athletic equipment or transportation, is all coming from the same revenue source, which can become a little bit challenging. There's such variance in the state of Florida with private schools, whether they're a charter school or they're a very expensive private school that may just have a bunch of money, or they're kind of that in between blue collar private school that has to do fundraising and those types of things. One thing I will tell you that I've learned from being in all three jobs is kids are kids. When I got into education and I went back to my alma mater, and you can appreciate this, I had such pride being a Clay Blue Devil. And my wife always jokes with me. She's like, you do realize there's other high schools out there and people do cheer for their school just as much as you cheer for yours. And it took me getting out of the nest, so to speak, to realize that. And now being a county AD and being a private school AD, kids are kids. They want to be pushed. They want to be celebrated, and they want to reach. It sounds cliche, but it's true. They want to reach for the stars. They want to get somewhere in their life, and in athletics is our medium to make that happen.
So going into student recognition, actually, with kids wanting to be celebrated, you're very famous for the Clay County Awards.
That's humbling.
So what is your timeline for that? Are you doing that all year round, planning for it? What's the end goal of every single year's award ceremony?
Yeah, awesome. So it's an award show. I always correct people.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding with you. But the award show, right? So we started that. I took a program that was started by Mike Wingate back in Clay County. He started the first athletics ceremony, and then we said, you know what? We want this to be a show. And we slowly but surely have raised it and raised it and raised it. And Jay Stillano, the athletic director in Clay County now, has done a fantastic job. I couldn't be more proud of him taking the torch and even upping it more. It's just exciting. I then did it at St. John's. So we did the St. John's Athletic Award Show this past spring. And it's one of those things that's kind of an ever-evolving process. So for those that have not seen it, what we do is we create an ESPY-style award show to celebrate the year in athletics. We recognize student athletes that have won state championships. We recognize student athletes that have won academic awards. But I think the biggest thing, and what I would challenge our listeners to do, is you're building your department's culture. So we create awards that signify our core values. And we did that in the county, and we do it at St. John's. So for instance, we really value students that go into the military. So we had a Spartan to Service award that we created. We had a student athlete that got a congressional appointment to both the Naval and Air Force Academy. So the congressman's office came to St. John's, presented her. We had this big Eagle trophy. It was really neat. Presented that, and Sophia Conde is now at the Air Force Academy. She was a 3-sport athlete at St. John's and didn't even go to Air Force to play sports. She went to enlist into the academy, but it gives your students, your awards gives your students something to strive for. And that's the number one reason we do this, is we're continuing to develop our culture as a school or as a county, but we're giving students tangible goals that they can achieve, right? So one of the big ones when I was the county AD was the Unsung Volunteer of the Year. So this is a student athlete that has the most volunteer hours out of the entire county. So I would run into students on campus and they'd be like, Coach Sgromolo, how do I win that award? And I'm like, well, here's the criteria. And a lot of times they come see you as a freshman because it's a body of work kind of award. One of the things that I'm most proud of is our sportsmanship awards. I think in society these days, we're starting to see a tremendous shift on some of the traditional values that we all hold so dear, with respect and teamwork and sportsmanship. So that's a big one that has always been a fan favorite. That award is based off a student's actions throughout the school year. So I've seen some really touching stories of, kids getting injured in the game and someone on the team stopping play to ensure that someone's safe. Really having sportsmanship. And it could be something where someone loses a title game and they have enough humility to go over and shake the hand of the opposing coach or whatever it may be. So ultimately, though, the award shows, the question was, why do you do it? And the real reason is to ensure two things. Number one, that we are creating tangible goals that our student athletes can achieve that align with our values. But ultimately, it always boils back down to this. These kids get 4 years of high school, and I think, and I have this passion because I had coaches that had this same belief. It's our job as coaches, parents, administrators, and athletic directors to make those 4 years the best they can possibly be. That's the real goal.
Definitely. And with those 4 years, that's something they're going to remember forever and take that with them. Going into the sportsmanship side of it, with educating coaches, not only on sportsmanship, but also on rules and eligibility. Like, what is your process for education of your coaches? Because that's going to go down to the students in terms of sportsmanship. So what's your process look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it all starts at the beginning of the school year. In that, not only just the beginning of the school year as your department, but from day one when you meet a coach. So as an athletic administrator, you're making hiring decisions. Now, in public school, a lot of times the principal is going to have the final say. The principal is going to go off of your recommendation. So when I meet with coaches for the first time, I ask some very specific questions, like, if contentious situations happen, how do you respond? Or why do you coach? I think that's a great question for athletic directors to ask prospective coaches. Why do you coach? If that answer contains something about citizenship or building good young people, you're probably on the right track. If they run right in there and say, well, I want to win a state championship at all costs, well, that may not be aligned with our values here, So it starts early, and I think as an AD, you start planting those seeds of what we're about, right? Leadership to me is all about setting expectations, providing support to those expectations, and then having accountability to those expectations. A lot of times throughout the years, especially as a county AD, when I would witness athletic programs that didn't have the type of sportsmanship we were looking for, 9 times out of 10, it's because there wasn't a expectation set by the leadership, right? And I think that there's two things. You got to practice what you preach, but more importantly than that is, what are you doing as an athletic administrator to set that expectation? That's the bigger question. Is I used to challenge our ADs in Clay County all the time. You say you're about sportsmanship, but what are you tangibly doing to reinforce that you're about sportsmanship? One thing we do at St. John's Country Day is the game environment statement, and I got this from Flagler. My AD at Flagler did it, and I've single-handedly see it change game environments. So at every field that we have or court, game site that we have that has a PA system, and I know this by heart because at Flagler I was the baseball player that read it before every game. We have a script that we give to both teams, and it's just simple paragraphs like this. So if St. John's is playing Orange Park, the home student athlete takes the microphone. This is before the starting lineups, and says, good evening, welcome to St. John's Country Day School for tonight's volleyball game between the Spartans and the Orange Park Raiders. We see this court as an extension of the classroom environment where we learn dignity and respect for others. The home student athlete passes the microphone to the visiting student athlete. They then say, we request your support and cooperation in supporting both teams in a positive manner. We expect that you treat all officials, players, fans, and coaches with respect, and we hope you enjoy the game. When parents in the community gets to hear from the students that are competing on the court, it goes way further than the PA announcer reading the standard script. And to me, that is a tangible example of setting the expectation of behavior that you expect for the contest, right? So that's one example. There's many that you could do. I think one of the things I've seen some districts do that I really like in some schools is celebrating sportsmanship, actually recognizing sportsmanship. Jay Stillano has started a really cool thing in Clay County where he has these cards, and it was like, you've been spotted being a good sport. And then he then delivers those to the campuses, and the athletic directors present them to the students. So, and there's all kinds of examples of great sportsmanship, but ultimately setting that standard and then having actual tangible things you're doing to, I hate to say it this way, but put your money where your mouth is. We are about this. We're going to be accountable to it, and we're going to spread the word of the great things that we're doing along with it.
I love that. I think those are great examples that ADs, even a first-year AD, can use. So with that, how do you really handle the eligibility side, since we are on the T with ENC? For those of you that don't know, ENC is eligibility and compliance. So we want to go talk a little bit in terms of how do you handle paperwork, and what are your processes for eligibility forms? Sure.
So we can go whichever way you want to go. So I think the way we start is this. Your job, like I said earlier, my job as a county AD was to protect the ADs from themselves, right? So a lot of times we have a lot going on, and as a school-based administrator, your number one job is to protect your coaches from themselves. They have one goal, making sure, and they should, making sure that their program is firing on all cylinders. High school head coaches have a lot on their plate, whether it's fundraising or dealing with working with parents, working with school-based administration, academic monitoring, facility management. I've yet to list eligibility and compliance, right? So that is definitely your number one oversight as the director of athletics. The principal is also going to be held accountable to what the AD is doing, but in the athletic department, eligibility and compliance starts with you. So step number one is education. I think it's very important for you as an AD to educate your coaches on why eligibility and compliance is important. I'm not a big fan of the carrot and stick method, in terms of you're going to get in trouble for all these 95 things, but it's more so the unintended consequences, maybe, right? So I like to take the humanistic approach, and it's not always about rules because I think people stop listening when it's always about that. But this is a very kind of crazy example, but let's say if you have a cross-country runner that was going to participate without a sports physical and had a heart condition, right? What if that was your son or daughter? You don't want to put people in that position. So there's a medical safeguard reason for things like physicals and consent and liability and those types of things. So education is step number one. So education is hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing, okay? Step number two is you have to develop a process that is easy and efficient that coaches can carry out. ADs do it a lot of different ways. Some ADs they delegate the physicals to athletic trainers. They might do them all themselves. I've seen a lot of ADs that do that, which at some schools works, in some schools it doesn't. I mean, if you're a 7A school with 4,000 kids, you're probably not doing everything on your own. And then for me, like a smaller school, I have kind of a mix. Like our athletic trainer does it, and then I cross-verify what he has done. So step one is educating on why we're doing what we're doing. Step two is developing a process for verification. And then step three is follow through on that process to ensure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And then feel free for we can go in more depth with that.
So physicals, you turn that into, you move that responsibility over to your athletic trainer with you just kind of double checking. In terms of like international students or non-traditional students, is that something that goes through your coaches and then they come to you? Or, as soon as you get an athletic packet, you can identify that the student is international or non-traditional?
Great question. So a huge nugget of advice that I've learned in the past 10 years, number one, never assume people know, right? So as an athletic director, we work with the Red Book constantly. It's something that we view, weekly, bi-weekly, if not every other week, you're looking into that Red Book. So don't assume as an AD that your coaches know anything in that Red Book. And that's not a dig towards coaches. It's just so far out of their lane, they're not going to know the common knowledge that you may know about the Red Book. The second thing I want to say, especially to our new ADs that are listening, learn that Red Book. The faster you learn the Red Book, the faster you're going to be able to make decisions and the more effective you'll be in the decision-making process. So going back to the original question, I think the question was about international students. I think that it's important to take I've learned this in my career, you take every student as a case-by-case basis, because a lot of the times there are specific criteria that will then trigger a specific action, right? So, and now I think today, there's more on athletic directors' plates than there ever has been with school choice, because it's no longer now, is Amanda on the volleyball team? It then becomes a checklist of, does Amanda go to our school, right? And that kind of changes some things. And then if Amanda does not physically come to our school in the brick and mortar setting, what mode of education is she receiving? So I look at it as a flow chart. I definitely personally look at it as a flow chart. In that flow chart's very simple. Are they brick and mortar? Are they non-traditional? And then from there, I go through two separate paths. If they're brick and mortar, do they have their physical? Do they have the eligible academics? And then is there any other extenuating circumstance like a transfer and those types of things? If they're non-traditional, okay, we go through the same thing. It all starts with the physical, right? I mean, that's kind of step number one. I always look at that first because that's going to have to happen. And then from there, you guys, I'll just give a huge props to the ENC staff. You guys, with all the legislative changes, I thought you guys navigated it fantastically. We have resources. Now, hopefully, ADs, you're checking home campus, you're using the toolbox that is there for you. And then on top of that, the FHSAA has done a good job. Send them an email, give them a phone call. They are here to help. And I've been very appreciative of your teamwork in getting us to where we need to go with all of the choice options that have came out. So ultimately, though, back to the question again, sorry. International students and any of those, I call them onesies, twosies, because that's the tough thing is as an AD sometimes, and Jordan's in here too, she'll laugh too, because I'll call and I'll process a student athlete one time, 1 year. and then I won't have to do it again for 2 or 3 years. So it's better just to check all your boxes, get all of the information you possibly can to make those decisions. But that starts with me as the AD. So one thing, and this is a great piece of advice for athletic directors with eligibility and compliance, and I told my ADs in Clay County to talk to their coaches. This is another thing with assuming. If you're a coach at a school, and ADs, I would advise you to tell your coaches this. On that first day of practice, or that first day where you are in charge, and it's not a third party team, you are full-fledged FHSA on the clock. If there is a student out there that you do not recognize, you need to contact your athletic director immediately. Do not assume that they're new to your school. Don't assume that they go to your school. And I say that because that's the best practice to protect yourself from getting in a bad situation. I've seen some coaches over the years that they mean well. They don't want to send a kid home. They don't want to be the bad guy. And it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with getting it right the first time to preventing some really unfortunate things down the path. So when you see someone you don't recognize, hey, I need you to meet with my athletic director. It's just standard protocol. We'll get everything figured out.
Yeah, that's definitely a good piece of advice. So going into advice, as a first-year AD, what would your biggest piece of advice for them would be? I know you mentioned a little bit about the Red Book, but going outside into operations or eligibility, what would be your number one recommendation or piece of advice?
That's a tough question because there's so many things that you could do to improve your craft. So you're saying as an AD period, or do you want to know eligibility, or we could do both?
We can do both.
Let's do both. So my number one piece of advice for an athletic administrator getting into the job for the first time is find a mentor. Find someone that you can call that has experience, and I would say has successful experience in the job that you can lean on. There's all kinds of other advice as it pertains to networking and those types of things, but if you have someone that you can lean on that's been a successful athletic director, that has done the job at a high level, that's available to you, that's going to be super valuable. And just remember this, you can't be everything to everyone. I think that was, for me as an AD, I wanted to be Johnny's super communicator, and I learned real quick that you could get yourself in trouble by being too fast and not doing your due diligence on some things. So that's kind of another piece of advice is you can't be everything to everyone. Step back, take a deep breath, know that there's a team of people willing to help you. And, the turnover rate for athletic administrators is like over 40% now. So I just look at Clay County, and Clay County is a great place. And I love living in the community, and the senior staff in the school district support athletics tremendously. Even then, I mean, of the 14 ADs we had, and I'm only 2 years removed from that job, more than half of them have switched to another person. And it's just because the job is tough. It is a tough job. So know out there that there's a lot of support at your fingertips. From an eligibility and compliance perspective, the best piece of advice I could give to a new athletic director, and it's going to sound simple, but I'm telling you, it's like I tell my coaches, read the Red Book. I tell my coaches all the time, read the rule book. We've had Dr. Tim Baghurst at Florida State, who has a master's. He runs the master's in coaching program there. We had a great discussion one time about how in high school athletics, a lot of times coaches and ADs will get bent out of shape about a ruling on something. They don't know the rule. You guys would maybe be surprised that I still encounter people every once in a while, 2 to 3 months, that say, oh, well, so-and-so followed their coach that they play travel for. That's an older rule, right? So we're probably like 4 or 5 years removed, even more than that. I'm being signaled now that rule has been changed. So really knowing that Red Book is important. And here's a great piece of advice. Call the FHSAA office and say, hey, I'm a first-year athletic director. What rulings, and this would be a good maybe for a future podcast, what are the rulings that this office deals with the most, right? Because if the high likelihood is if the staff is dealing with these types of rulings, you're going to have to deal with it too. And I would imagine from being in the profession, non-traditional rulings is something that it comes up often. And then obviously those onesie twosies, we call them with international kids. But it starts with the Red Book and learning the basics on eligibility and compliance.
And you nailed it. Just give us a call. We're happy to jump on a Zoom, especially with first-year ADs. Jumping on a Zoom, kind of going over bylaw 9. That's where we basically live in terms of eligibility. So with that, how could, if you could do it all over again, is there anything that you would change?
That's a great question. And it's tough because I think I'm a big believer in, you don't ever lose, but you always learn. And I think a lot of the things that I've experienced as an athletic director, I learned the hard way, not by purpose or by malice, but just by experience. That's why I love being an AD. No 2 days are the same, and that's the best part of the job. But if I could do it over again, I would definitely get involved a little bit faster than I did. Throughout my career, I've gotten to do so many cool things with the FHSA Representative Assembly, the Athletic Directors Advisory Council, working with some of the sport councils, getting involved in the FIAAA, our professional association as ADs. I think when you get involved in those things, you then unlock that mentorship that I was talking about. You guys both know Jake Von Scher, an older AD. Sorry, Jake, you're not super old, but nevertheless, he's created a podcast. And during COVID, I met Jake Von Scher. You got to remember, I was a county athletic director, so I had already been an AD for 5 years. Jake just showed me this whole new world of professional networking in the job that I'm like, geez, my first 2 or 3 years, I would have loved to have this information. So putting yourself out there, just remember this, athletic directors, everyone started at the ground floor at some point. They were a first-year AD. They were a second-year, third-year, just like you are. And we're a network of brothers and sisters that are all vying for the same goal. And people are here to help. I've yet to run into anyone in our profession that's not willing to answer questions or at least guide you in the direction of getting an answer. So ultimately, don't hesitate to ask that question of, hey, I just need some advice, or what's your opinion on this? Because it could lead to a lot of good friendships and experience down the road.
Well, John, it was great having you today. Thank you for being our inaugural guest from the Tea with ENC. We truly value your time and your essential role that you play within our association, not only as an AD, but within our association, like you mentioned, Representative Assembly, ADAC. So be sure to join us next month for another episode of The Tea with ENC. Until then, stay curious, stay connected, and keep bringing your unique insights to the table. We appreciate all our listeners and look forward to sharing more engaging conversations with you soon. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and keep the conversation brewing.